The land lies open beneath a sky that refuses stillness. Wind crosses the steppe in long, even strokes, flattening grass and lifting it again, as if testing what will endure. Morning comes without color, only a thinning of shadow, a loosening of cold. Frost withdraws unevenly, clinging to hollows while bare earth darkens where hooves have passed. Nothing announces change. It arrives through repetition. Movement resumes before sound fully returns. Herds shift in slow arcs, guided more by memory than command. Smoke rises from scattered fires, thin and controlled, never excessive. Paths appear not as lines but as habits worn into the land. The steppe holds its silence carefully, allowing only what is necessary. Möngke moves within this quiet without distinction. He rides early, when breath still shows faintly and the ground resists weight. His posture is ordinary, his pace measured. He watches the spacing of camps, the distance between wells, the condition of store pits left from the previous season. Nothing here speaks of elevation. It speaks of continuity. Responsibility precedes ambition in his movement. He does not seek the center, he checks its edges. Where supplies thin, he pauses. Where labor lingers too long in one place, he notes it. The empire has reached a size where neglect multiplies faster than effort. He understands this not as fear, but as obligation. Systems reveal themselves most clearly under restraint. Roads require maintenance more than expansion. Markets depend on trust more than volume. Justice must be consistent enough to be predictable, yet flexible enough to absorb difference. Labor must rotate to preserve strength. Survival here is an arrangement, not a victory. A quiet disorder presses inward from distance. It is not rebellion, but drift. Accounts differ slightly. Measures vary by region. Authority loosens where oversight thins. Möngke feels the pressure accumulate without noise. The response cannot be sudden. Sudden force fractures what habit can correct. He delays, observes, restrains impulse. The decision is not to punish but to align. Methods are gathered, compared, reduced to shared practice. Officials are recalled briefly, not to be replaced but to be retrained. Precedent is clarified. Rule tightens without spectacle. From this, structure settles. Administration begins to hold its shape across distance. Records align. Labor cycles stabilize. Justice follows method rather than mood. Expansion continues, but it is inward now, deepening coherence rather than widening reach. The cost emerges slowly. Days lengthen. Attention thins. Familiar faces become names carried across reports. Leadership consumes time without replenishment, yet the system absorbs strain. It learns to function without constant correction. As evening returns, wind moves again across the grass, steady and indifferent. Fires burn low, camps quiet. Möngke watches the pattern hold, aware that authority here is not displayed, but sustained through repetition and restraint. What endures is not the rider, nor the command, but the arrangement that allows many lives to move together without collision, guided by methods strong enough to persist when the wind passes on. Midday light settles across the plain, flattening distance and stripping color from the land. Heat does not yet press, but it waits, suspended. The steppe opens itself without generosity. Everything visible is also exposed. Movement here must justify itself. Möngke continues through ordinary labor. He stops where grain is stored, not to inspect abundance, but to note order. Containers are counted. Seals are checked. The placement of guards matters less than the clarity of responsibility. Where many hands touch provision, confusion grows unless method intervenes. His thoughts turn repeatedly to scale. What once relied on kinship and memory now depends on record and routine. The empire has crossed a threshold where familiarity no longer holds it together. Obligation must be carried by system rather than presence. This recognition weighs more than ambition ever could. Responsibility surfaces in small corrections. A clerk records twice where once was enough. A messenger waits longer than needed. These are not failures of loyalty, but of structure. Möngke addresses them without reprimand. Instruction replaces censure. The work is slow, but it holds. Roads converge near the center, worn smooth by repetition. He walks one stretch himself, feeling the firmness underfoot, noting where water has weakened its edge. Roads are not paths of conquest now. They are arteries of survival. Grain, labor, judgment all travel them. If they fail, distance becomes disorder. Markets open briefly, then close. Exchange is quiet, regulated by custom rather than demand. Measures are checked against standard weights. Disputes are resolved through reference, not persuasion. Justice here is not dramatic, it is predictable. That predictability calms more than force. Labor is rotated deliberately. No group remains too long at one task. Exhaustion breeds error. Error breeds resentment. Möngke understands this chain intimately. He intervenes not at the point of failure but before it forms. This prevention is invisible, yet essential. A threat surfaces in report form, thin and indirect. Supplies arrive late from a distant region. No explanation accompanies the delay. Möngke does not assume intent. Distance distorts effort as much as desire. He orders verification before response. Time is allowed to clarify cause. The decision requires restraint. Impulse would demand immediate correction. Instead, he chooses patience, allowing system to test itself. When the delay is traced to poor record-keeping rather than defiance, adjustment follows quietly. Training replaces punishment. Alignment is restored without rupture. From this emerges a clearer method. Records are standardized further. Responsibility is narrowed. Each task gains a defined owner. Precedent forms not through decree but through repetition. Administration thickens, becoming less dependent on individual judgment. Expansion continues almost unnoticed. Regions align themselves with this clarity, drawn by its stability. They adapt measures, records, and labor cycles to match. Authority spreads not by force but by usefulness. The empire grows inward, strengthening its core. The cost accrues without announcement. Möngke's days compress into sequences of attention. Rest fragments, silence becomes scarce. Leadership demands presence even when unseen. Yet the system absorbs his effort and multiplies it, returning coherence where there might have been strain. As dusk approaches, wind lifts dust from the road edges and carries it away. Fires are lit sparingly, movement slows. Möngke watches the center hold, aware that power here is no longer a matter of command, but of careful maintenance, sustained through methods that remember when individuals must let go. Morning returns with a soft chill. Mist clings to low hollows, masking the boundaries of the steppe. Roads glisten with dew, reflecting light that shifts before the eye can settle. Movement is tentative, deliberate. Every horse, every cart respects the unseen measure of distance. Möngke rises before the camp fully wakes. He moves among aides and scribes, not as a master, but as a participant in the order he sustains. His coat bears the marks of repeated seasons. His boots scuff the same ground walked countless times. Observation is his first act of labor. Responsibility finds him first in the small, precise corrections of daily administration. A ledger is misaligned, a clerk hesitates, a messenger overextends his route. These minor errors carry consequences. They are the whispers of disorder. Möngke addresses them quietly, insisting on continuity rather than punishment. The systems of the empire reveal themselves in subtlety. Roads, markets, granaries, and labor rotations operate through repetition. Justice is traced not through dramatic displays, but by careful record and precedent. These mechanisms multiply the effect of discipline without reliance on fear. A challenge arises when distant provinces fail to coordinate labor effectively. Grain stores fluctuate, artisans delay production. The imbalance threatens cohesion. Möngke's attention shifts from inspection to observation. Patterns emerge. Weakness is located, contained, and corrected before it spreads. Restraint becomes his moral compass. Immediate reaction would satisfy the impulse to display authority. Instead, he allows systems to self-correct. By choosing method over spectacle, he shapes habits rather than obedience, ensuring stability endures longer than compliance. Institutional response follows naturally. Rules are clarified. Rotation schedules are enforced. Reports now carry explicit references. Precedent thickens the network of expectations. Authority becomes a function of structure, not personality. The center solidifies without ostentation. Expansion proceeds through stability rather than conquest. Newly integrated territories observe existing routines. They adopt methods for managing grain, labor, and justice before full incorporation. Growth is measured, deliberate, and sustainable. Continuity attracts participation more than reward or threat. The internal cost of leadership surfaces subtly. Sleep shortens. Hunger becomes a conscious interval rather than a signal. Fatigue presses against decision-making. Möngke endures this compression silently, aware that his own labor is multiplied through systems, but cannot be replaced by them entirely. Reflection occupies his quiet moments. He observes that what persists is not the individual will, but the consistency of method. The empire's stability is embedded in repetition, expectation, and careful coordination. Personal ambition is secondary to the endurance of these routines. Succession is not immediate, but thought is given to its mechanisms. Responsibility is distributed among trusted aides. Authority is encoded in process rather than conferred by presence. When the moment arrives, transfer will occur through preparation, not crisis. Evening light softens across the camp. Roads, markets, and granaries all hold their place. The wind crosses the steppe with impartial persistence. Möngke stands at the edge, witness to the quiet endurance of order he has shaped, understanding that legacy is measured by what continues, not by what is claimed. Dawn comes slowly, pale light spilling across the camp. Mist rises from the low earth, curling along roads and courtyards. Horses shift restlessly, their breath forming small clouds that vanish into the cool morning. The steppe is still, save for the soft rustle of cloth and leather. Möngke moves among clerks and messengers. He does not command loudly but guides quietly. A ledger is checked, a caravan's path reviewed, a dispatch confirmed. His presence is measured, a calibration rather than spectacle. Ordinary motion carries weight here. Responsibility asserts itself before desire. Each task deferred threatens larger disorder. Grain storage must be balanced, labor rotations monitored, markets observed. Every small act prevents cascading failure. Authority is exercised in precision, not display. The systems of administration extend beyond his direct sight. Couriers trace routes, carrying instructions anchored in precedent. Granaries are counted, roads are maintained. Artisans and laborers follow repeated routines. Each layer sustains the next. Stability is emergent, not declared. A challenge emerges when distant provinces report delayed tax deliveries. Artisans miscalculate production schedules. Tension rises quietly beneath the surface. Möngke listens first, observing patterns, discerning causes, and weighing options. The pressure is procedural, not personal. Restraint guides every decision. Immediate force would satisfy instinct but risk larger instability. Möngke allows systems to correct themselves where possible, reinforcing expectation through repetition. Authority becomes embedded in method, not in assertion of presence. Institutional response is methodical, rotations are clarified, messengers reinforced, records cross-checked, precedent guides adjustment. Each measure multiplies stability without public demonstration. Authority grows through adherence, not spectacle. Expansion follows discipline. Newly integrated regions adopt existing practices before full inclusion. Grain management, labor schedules, and justice routines are learned, practiced, and absorbed. Growth is deliberate, measured, and resilient. Participation emerges from order, not coercion. The internal cost of leadership is quiet but real. Fatigue accumulates. Meals are irregular. Sleep is interrupted. Decisions bear weight beyond immediate consequence. Möngke endures, understanding that oversight is relentless and personal capacity is finite. Reflection comes in these moments of calm. He observes that persistence of order depends not on personality, but on careful repetition and expectation. Structures endure longer than any individual. Personal desire is secondary to system continuity. Succession is considered without ceremony. Responsibility is distributed among trusted aides. Authority is codified through procedure and habit. Transfer will occur through preparation and collective memory, not through display or proclamation. Evening light settles across the camp. Courtyards, roads, and granaries hold their place. Horses rest, couriers pause. Wind moves steadily, indifferent yet constant. Möngke surveys the pattern he has reinforced, aware that the measure of leadership is endurance, not visibility. Heat gathers slowly through the long days, pressing down rather than advancing. Dust lifts with every movement and lingers longer than before, refusing to settle. The land hardens under repeated passage. Paths become fixed through use, not marking. Summer does not expand possibility, it tests endurance. Möngke adjusts his rhythm to this pressure. He travels less distance but covers more ground in attention. Where he once rode to observe, he now listens to what returns to him through record and report. Administration has grown dense enough to speak on its own, if read carefully. He learns to hear it. Responsibility now arrives as accumulation rather than urgency. There are no singular crises, only the steady pull of maintenance. Markets must be watched so they do not swell beyond control. Labor must be shifted before exhaustion becomes resentment. Justice must remain even as exceptions multiply. These demands arrive daily without pause. Systems show strain under success. Increased trade thickens roads and complicates storage. Prosperity attracts movement faster than structure can absorb. Möngke feels the danger in this imbalance. Growth without method is decay delayed. He begins to slow what could easily accelerate. A controlled confrontation emerges through regulation. Routes are limited. Access is staggered. Some opportunities are refused not because they threaten power, but because they threaten coherence. This restraint frustrates those who seek advantage. Möngke holds the line quietly. Order must precede gain. The moral decision is constant now, repeated in small forms. Each refusal carries cost. Each delay invites doubt. Yet he chooses consistency over expansion, knowing that systems stretched too thin remember nothing. Stability demands sacrifice long before collapse announces itself. Institutional response deepens. Offices are reorganized not by rank but by function. Records are simplified, then enforced. Overlapping authority is removed. Responsibility narrows. Each role becomes clearer, heavier, less flexible. Administration tightens without noise. Expansion continues despite restraint but in altered form. Regions adjust themselves inward, aligning schedules, measures, and obligations. Influence spreads through imitation rather than decree. The empire's reach lengthens because its center no longer wavers. The cost sharpens. Möngke feels time compress. Days blur into task. Distance from ordinary life grows. Familiar warmth fades into routine acknowledgement. Leadership no longer offers novelty, only repetition. This repetition is its burden. At night, Fires burn lower to conserve fuel. Voices soften. Wind passes through camp without resistance. Möngke remains awake longer than needed, reviewing patterns rather than events. He understands that nothing here depends on inspiration. It depends on endurance. What holds through heat is not strength but structure. What survives pressure is not ambition but restraint. And as the land bears summer without yielding, the administration bears its own weight, advancing not through force, but through the discipline to refuse what it cannot yet sustain. The heat breaks unevenly. Clouds gather without promise, thinning light before offering relief. When rain comes, it falls hard and brief, carving lines into dust that harden again within hours. The land absorbs what it can and releases the rest. Summer teaches economy through excess. Möngke moves through this season with narrowed patience. Fatigue has settled into him, not as weakness but as measure. Each task is weighed more carefully now. He refuses urgency unless necessity proves it. Administration has learned to wait for his silence before acting, and in that pause, its own discipline shows. Threat arrives without spectacle. A distant region delays tribute not in defiance but confusion. New measures have reached unevenly. Old habits resist quiet change. Möngke does not send force, he sends correction. Records precede riders. Clarification precedes command. This choice costs time. It invites testing. Some interpret restraint as distance. Pressure gathers as messengers return with partial compliance. The impulse to harden response rises, brief and sharp. He contains it. Order must instruct before it compels. Institutional remedy replaces confrontation. Measures are standardized again and redistributed. Officials are rotated, not punished. Accountability is restored through method, not fear. The delay lengthens, but alignment follows. What returns is slower but cleaner. Expansion pauses visibly now. The empire does not advance outward. It consolidates inward. Markets stabilize. Roads thin of excess traffic. Storage evens. Movement regains rhythm. This stillness unsettles those who measure power by motion. Möngke accepts their unease. Stability rarely looks like strength. The cost becomes personal. Sleep fractures. Illness lingers longer. His body answers effort with delay. He adjusts his presence without announcement, delegating what can stand without him. This withdrawal is careful. Authority must recede without leaving void. Reflection arrives uninvited. He recognizes that what he governs now could continue without his hand, if not without his memory. That realization carries relief and loss together. To be necessary is weight. To be replaceable is silence. Succession enters thought quietly. No name is spoken. Roles are reinforced instead. Continuity is prepared through habit rather than declaration. The empire does not need heirs as much as it needs method. As evening returns, wind crosses the plain with cooler intent. Fires are set with less urgency. The land prepares to turn again. Möngke watches the systems hold through restraint and understands the shape of what he has built. What endures does not announce itself. It repeats. It adapts. It survives attention and neglect alike. And in that repetition, power fades into structure, leaving behind not a figure to remember, but a way of holding the world steady long enough for others to move within it. Autumn arrives through subtraction. Heat loosens its grip, insects thin, and the land exhales dust it no longer needs to hold. Grass pales unevenly, revealing the soil beneath in quiet patches. Wind returns with steadier purpose, carrying sound farther and sharpening distance. Movement slows without command. Möngke senses the change before it appears in record. Seasonal adjustment has become instinctive. Roots contract. Storage replaces exchange as the primary concern. What moved freely now settles into pattern. Administration shifts from alignment to preservation. Systems respond differently under cooling pressure. Markets narrow and become more deliberate. Justice grows quieter, resolving fewer disputes because expectations have stabilized. Labor turns inward, focused on repair rather than production. Survival resumes its older shape, disciplined and exacting. A controlled disturbance surfaces as regions prepare unevenly. One area hoards grain beyond guideline, fearing loss more than imbalance. The act is small, but its echo carries risk. Möngke responds without accusation. Redistribution is ordered through surplus channels already in place. The correction feels impersonal, and that is its strength. Restraint again defines choice. Punishment would instruct fear. Adjustment instructs continuity. He allows the system to correct itself, trusting that precedent will speak louder than force. Compliance follows slowly, then completely. Institutional memory deepens. Seasonal councils meet by habit rather than summons. Records are reviewed for pattern, not blame. Method replaces vigilance. The administration has learned to anticipate rather than react. Expansion continues quietly even now. Smaller groups align themselves with established rhythms, seeking inclusion through adherence rather than appeal. Growth arrives as absorption, not conquest. Stability remains the offering. The internal cost sharpens with the cold. Möngke feels the narrowing of endurance. Recovery lengthens. Attention must be rationed. He chooses where to be absent as carefully as where to be present. Leadership becomes subtraction. He reflects without ceremony. The empire's weight no longer presses outward against the world. It presses inward against itself, demanding coherence. This pressure is heavier, less visible, and more enduring. As nights lengthen, fires are kept low and constant. Wind passes through camp without disturbance. The land prepares for winter and the system mirrors it. What has been built does not rush the season. It adjusts. Continuity now belongs to habit more than authority. The structure holds because it has learned to move with less. And in that restraint, power reveals its final form, not as command, but as the quiet capacity to endure change without losing shape. Winter settles without spectacle. Snow arrives in intervals, light enough at first to seem temporary, then persistent enough to redraw the land. Sound flattens, distance contracts. The steppe narrows itself again, testing what has been prepared rather than what has been promised. Möngke moves less across space and more through record. His days are shaped by review rather than travel. Ledgers replace roads. Seals replace messengers. Authority now circulates through marks made quietly and read carefully. The empire continues to move while he remains still. Administration reveals its true weight in winter. Storage is measured repeatedly. Distribution follows schedule rather than request. Labor rotates without complaint. Survival no longer depends on improvisation. It depends on fidelity to method. The system answers scarcity with memory. A threat emerges not as invasion but as delay. One region falters in delivery, slowed by weather and miscalculation. The gap widens subtly. Möngke resists urgency. He adjusts flow elsewhere, buying time. Pressure is redistributed, not applied. Crisis dissolves into inconvenience. This choice carries cost. Some endure tighter rationing. Fatigue deepens. Gratitude is absent. Leadership here earns no praise. It prevents collapse and leaves no trace. Restraint remains invisible. Institutional response sharpens. Redundancy is reinforced. Alternate routes are prepared even when unused. The administration learns to assume failure without announcing it. Strength accumulates through anticipation. Expansion pauses. This is not retreat. It is consolidation shaped by season. Inclusion slows. Alignment is verified before acceptance. Growth waits for ground to firm. The empire learns patience again. The internal burden presses harder in stillness. Möngke feels the solitude of oversight. Decisions echo without response. Correction replaces creation. The work grows quieter and heavier, authority becomes distance. He reflects on continuity not as idea, but as practice. What persists now does so because it has been repeated often enough to resist disruption. Memory has become structure. Habit has become law. Fires burn steadily in the cold. Wind moves unchanged above them. Snow absorbs the marks of movement almost as soon as they are made. Beneath it all, paths remain. And the system holds, not by force or vision, but by the discipline to maintain balance when nothing moves easily at all. The thaw begins unevenly. Snow loosens during daylight and tightens again at night, turning ground unreliable. Water moves without rhythm, testing paths and patience alike. The land does not return at once. It hesitates, reminding those who depend on it that endurance includes waiting. Möngke observes the change from stillness. Winter has stripped motion down to essentials, and now movement must be relearned carefully. Routes reopen in fragments. Supply resumes in layers. Nothing is restored in full. Administration mirrors the land, proceeding through trial rather than declaration. Systems that held under cold now face a different strain. Repair replaces rationing. Labor shifts outward again, but unevenly. Markets reopen cautiously, measuring trust against memory of scarcity. Justice resumes its quieter work, resolving disputes born from delay rather than desire. Survival alters its shape but not its demand. A controlled disorder surfaces as ambitions stir too quickly. Some press for expansion before ground is ready, mistaking thaw for abundance. Möngke feels the familiar pressure to answer momentum with permission. He resists. Speed now would fracture preparation. He chooses pause. Restraint under hope proves harder than restraint under threat. He narrows movement deliberately. Scouting precedes settlement. Assessment precedes exchange. Desire is acknowledged, then delayed. The system absorbs frustration without breaking. Balance is preserved. Institutional response becomes refinement. Timetables are adjusted. Oversight is decentralized further. Responsibility settles where practice has already taken root. The administration learns to flex without dissolving, to allow variation without losing coherence. Expansion resumes, but altered. It follows information rather than impulse. Smaller alignments form at the edges, integrated only after repetition confirms reliability. Growth appears gradual, almost reluctant, yet it holds. The internal cost sharpens again with motion. Fatigue returns in new form. Travel strains the body. Attention fragments across distance. Möngke measures himself against the system he has shaped and recognizes the narrowing gap between necessity and capacity. Reflection deepens quietly. What has been built now depends less on his endurance than on its own consistency. This knowledge steadies him even as it distances him. Leadership becomes custodial, oriented toward preservation rather than reach. As spring settles more firmly, grass thickens unevenly. Wind resumes its broader sweep. Camps reform along familiar lines. The empire moves again, not faster than before but more evenly. What persists through thaw and strain is not the will to advance, but the discipline to proceed only when ground can hold. And in that patience, continuity proves itself stronger than momentum, enduring because it remembers when to wait. Late spring steadies into early summer without announcement. Grass thickens enough to carry weight without tearing. Rivers withdraw into known courses, neither urgent nor fragile. Wind crosses the plain with its familiar patience, flattening the surface briefly before releasing it again. The land settles into a balance earned through restraint. Möngke rides once more, not far, not fast. His movement is ordinary, almost indistinguishable from that of others who travel the same routes for work rather than command. He observes how little turns toward him now. Schedules hold, records move forward, corrections occur before reaching his hand, Administration has become habit. Responsibility continues to pass without ceremony. Authority no longer concentrates. It circulates. Tasks remain where they are performed best. Decisions rise from pattern rather than appeal. Succession is not named, yet it unfolds through repetition. The system accepts its next carriers without pause. The internal burden loosens slightly, replaced by a quieter weight. Presence matters less than preservation. His labor has shifted from shaping to guarding against excess. Interference would now do more harm than absence. Leadership resolves into restraint exercised through distance. He reflects not on achievement but on alignment. Roads remain open because they are maintained. Markets function because they are predictable. Justice holds because it is consistent. Survival endures because no part of the system claims more than it can sustain. These truths no longer require his voice. Evening returns with long light. Fires are lit in sequence. Smoke rises straight in calm air. Wind moves across the camps without resistance. The empire breathes evenly, not because it expands, but because it holds. As darkness settles, the land reveals nothing of command or design. It shows only continuity. Tracks fade. Paths persist beneath use. What remains is the quiet order shaped over time, carried forward by many hands. And in that steady repetition, beneath wind that remembers nothing and ground that remembers everything, power finds its final form, not in how far it reaches, but in how carefully it is passed on.